Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, it is Targran back once again with more lore of League of Legends prepared for you all. Without further ado, I present to you the lore of Maokai, the Twisted Treant, and Thresh, the Chain Warden. Enjoy. The Rune Wars had shattered the continent, shaking its very foundations and changing Valoran's future for the long eons ahead. It did not even skip the twisted shadowlands of the Shadowed Isles. The brutal use of magic has corrupted the land even further than it already has been, slowly turning it into the place it currently is. Maokai was a tree, one of many trees on the island in fact. For long centuries he stood there surrounded by his kin, feeling their strong trunks and seeing leaves of every colour. It was his home, he was born there, and like every tree, he was meant to rot in this very place. But he did not mind his destiny. He was just a tree. Against his own will, however, he'd become a witness of a terrible axe. He watched people fight against one another, as the ground exploded underneath their very feet. He watched as the ground turned grey, dying, just like his friends, the other trees, who had been turning into nothing but writhen shades of their former glory. Even Maokai himself had been affected by those changes. The once beautiful island had split into three, by the accompanying numerous earthquakes ruining the balance of the land. Soon after, water started becoming poisonous, and Maokai was forced to watch many of his kin die. He stood there and absorbed the pain and sorrow from the events wrought upon the land and its life. Some time ago, maybe months, perhaps even centuries. That was completely irrelevant to the Treant. Others had come. People wielding magic staffs, hiding their faces under thick cloaks and hoods. They wanted to restrict the use of magic to small areas that they had called the Fields of Justice. And one of them was meant to be placed here, right in front of Maokai himself. And he stood there, watching as younger races had fought one another just to prove who was right. They never wondered if the use of magic would be right, if they should even do so recklessly. It was an easy choice to them. They were willing to take advantage over their enemies, by any means necessary. But what they did not know was that every spell that cast had affected the woods surrounding them. Some trees had been growing weaker, crackling and breaking in half. Others had been forming into shapes resembling faces of those who had been victims of spellcasters. Maokai was none of those. Spells had passed through him, filling him with strange energy that he did not know. Energy that allowed him to act. When another match had been taking place on the Twisted Tree Line, one of the trees had spontaneously roared to life. Maokai has arisen and started tearing through his own brothers in mindless fury. They were not his goal, however. He was going for the champions, the warriors of the younger races who were actors of this deadly spectacle he had been forced to watch. Driven by fury, he had assaulted them, and despite brave efforts, slain 6 of the champions fighting on both sides of the conflict. Only the intervention of the adjudicators of the League had allowed to stop the Treant's rampage and return the fallen champions to life. Maokai had been locked away under the Institute of Justice and has quickly drawn the interest of any summoner in the League. Everyone wanted to find out what the secret was behind his animation, and if it could be replicated in any way. They wanted to create an entire army of Treants to protect their position. At first, Maokai could not communicate with humans, but the ages of wisdom have allowed him to quickly learn their simple language. He asked them to help him with research. He wanted to find a way to return to his old form. He wanted to be just a regular tree, and not the aberration he'd become due to the use of magic. After long discussion, he'd come to terms with summoners and agreed to serve as a champion of the League until he could be turned back into a tree. There was just one term that he had. Once Maokai was back to being a tree, the League had to abandon all research regarding animation of trees. Compared to the human lifespan, trees seemed almost immortal, and through long years they listened to everything the earth says to them. They listen how it cries upon drinking human blood, and the cries echo inside the minds for long ages, sometimes even longer than a human can live. Giving them a consciousness is almost a crime, as you force them to realize what they've been watching for so long. Until their deal is done, Maokai treads through the Fields of Justice, eager to punish every champion for their reckless use of magic. The giant tree moves along the lane to the fields of justice, and the only thing separating him from regular trees on the battlefield is a single lantern on his back, a clear sign of warning to anyone foolish enough to approach this behemoth. Thresh, the Chain Warden, is nowhere close to being a child of nature. Many have believed him to be the stuff of nightmares, a ghostly figure from tales and nursery rhymes often used to scare children. But very recently, with his unexpected emergence on the fields of justice, no one can feel safe. The legends don't give too many details about his past, but some things are common amongst all versions of the story. He'd once been a sadistic warden, a jailer from centuries past who took great pleasure and passion in torturing those who he was supposed to guard. With his trained mind, he's used every technique known to himself to slowly break his victims, not only physically, but mentally as well. Before he'd allowed them to find peace at the grave, he made them suffer. They were tortured until they had entirely lost their minds, and only then they would be allowed to rest while he took care of their bodies. Using a handful of chains, his weapon of choice, he had terrorized everyone in the prison, making sure they would not get any stupid ideas or run away or try to prevent what he had planned for them. Every single man in the prison had been shaking just hearing the shrill of scrape of chains being dragged along the floor. You'd probably keep the prison under reign of terror, if not for the desperation of the prisoners. They were afraid of their warden, and they wanted nothing to do with him. A riot had started in the prison, and not even Thresh could control everyone at the same time. Prisoners had destroyed the walls of their cells and set themselves free. Then they went straight for the torturer. With their bare hands they beat the warden to death and left him in the prison, hanging from the very chains that he used to torture them. And the tale could just end there, but it doesn't. Some dark force took great interest in the warden's work, and his death was just a minor setback. Just a few days after his execution, his body disappeared, and life of a horrible spectre known as Thresh had begun. He became a twisted reaper, seeking to ensnare the souls of the living using his newly granted power. He started haunting the land, leaving nothing but horror and despair in places he visited. He walked across the Valoran, collecting the souls of his victims, those that he handpicks due to some unusual qualities that they have. He's not careless. He puts his full attention to any soul he means to collect next. Otherwise he wouldn't be able to torture them like he always did. Upon picking his target, the warden starts playing with them, slowly causing them to go insane, like he did with his victims in the prison. He toys with them, isolates them from everyone else, and watches as their sanity slowly fades. When it is done, Thresh captures his victims and drags them back to the Shadow Isles where their souls might be harvested. Every soul that Thresh has collected is locked inside his lantern, and all that left behind is a trail of withered, drained corpses. Day after day he wanders across the land, looking for those who are promising enough, those who look like good victims, ones that he will have fun torturing. He enjoys watching them as their life gets drained away from them. This is the only way they can still feel pleasure, by watching others suffer. But as time has passed, Thresh has understood that the souls of average people would not be enough to fulfill his mysterious goal. He needed something more powerful, spirits that had more essence. He started seeking stronger souls that would be more useful, and his search has led into the League of Legends, where the bravest and boldest warriors of Valoran gather. Only upon collecting their souls would his work be considered finished. And that's all we prepared for you this time around. Let us know if you like this video by pressing the like button, leaving your feedback in the comment section below, and sharing this video around. If you enjoyed this one in particular, feel free to add it to your favourites as it helps us out a great deal. We do also happen to have a Facebook page, so feel free to like us there as well. Please do not forget that we've covered a lot of champions up to this point, and there's a high possibility that your favourite's already been covered. There's no reason to request them again. You can check that by pressing the annotation on the screen that will take you to our playlist. And as always, I'll see you next time.